Dear viewers, please let us know where you're watching from and which region or country you are in. Please like this video, watch it until the end, and subscribe to our channel. Your support is very important to us. Thank you so much.
Well, are you just going to stand there rooted to the spot? Go over there and keep a low profile. Her husband snapped, barely parting his lips. Natalie obediently stepped aside. He had no idea that hers was the exact gaze all the guests of honor were searching for tonight. Natalie was standing at the stove stirring the morning coffee when her husband's phone buzzed for the second time in 5 minutes. She didn't even turn her head. Stephen had long ago trained her not to touch his things, but when his voice came from the next room, there was something unusual in it. Confusion. "Nat, come here for a second," he called, and she, putting her mug on the table she had varnished herself 2 years ago after another round of "we have no money for new furniture," went to his call. Stephen was sitting on the edge of the bed, frowning at his phone. It was as if it was showing him something unpleasant. "What happened?" Natalie asked, stopping in the doorway and habitually adjusting her old bathrobe. "Damn it," he muttered. "Tomorrow evening there is an official reception at the Continental Hotel. Everyone is bringing their wives. Even Smith is bringing his, just so he doesn't stick out like a sore thumb." Natalie stayed silent. In 17 years of marriage, Stephen had never taken her to a single corporate event. "You'd be bored there," he used to say, tying his tie in front of the mirror. "Serious people, serious conversations. It's not your scene." "So what?" she asked quietly, feeling her heart beat a little faster. Stephen finally looked at her with irritation, as if she were an annoying item on a to-do list. "I'll have to take you, otherwise I'll look weird. Ian from our department was already asking where my wife was. It's getting awkward." A pang of anxiety struck inside her. Not resentment from such an invitation, but a premonition, because Natalie knew that tomorrow evening at that same Continental Hotel, the ceremony for the International Professor Hartman Award for Outstanding Contributions to Children's Charity was to take place. The award that No, she shouldn't think about that yet. "All right," she said, simply folding her hands together. "Just don't even think about dressing like you usually do." Stephen stood up and began sorting through his ties. "There will be wives of directors, bankers, respectable women, well-groomed. Buy something decent, black, formal, but without unnecessary spending. I don't want people thinking I throw money around." Natalie nodded, feeling that familiar bitterness somewhere in her throat. 17 years of such advice, 17 years of explanations that she was not good enough, not educated enough, not suitable for his circle. "And another thing," he added, hanging his suit on the closet door. "Keep quiet. Don't butt into conversations that don't concern you. Just sit there and smile. There will be influential people there, people whose single word can change someone's life. Do you understand?" "I understand," Natalie replied, and there wasn't a drop of irony in her voice, although right now she wanted to laugh out loud. Influential people changing other people's fates. If only he knew how many of them had personally thanked her, how many had donated huge sums after she told them the children's stories. But at home, this was never discussed. Stephen considered her work at the foundation a cute, pointless hobby. When he went to the shower, Natalie sat on the bed and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, 5 years of hard work would receive international recognition. Tomorrow, the whole room would learn about the Children's Horizon Foundation, which she had built from scratch in the evenings at the kitchen table while Stephen watched TV, about hundreds of saved children's lives, about millions of dollars raised for the treatment of children with rare diseases. And sitting next to her would be the man who considered her a burden. Natalie opened her eyes and looked at herself in the mirror. Simple loungewear, hair in a messy ponytail, the tired face of a 44-year-old woman who had spent all these years dissolving herself in someone else's ambitions. But tomorrow, everything would change. An autumn rain was falling outside the window. The playground in their suburban neighborhood glistened with puddles. The very playground where she once dreamed of walking with her own children. children they never ended up having. Stephen always found reasons to wait. The sound of running water came from the bathroom. A regular morning, a regular routine. He didn't even ask if she had her own plans for tomorrow. He just stated it as a fact. I'll have to take you. Natalie picked up her phone. Several unread messages from colleagues at the foundation. Tomorrow is your triumph, wrote Katie, her deputy, and the only person who knew the truth about Natalie's family life. Finally, the world will know who you really are. Another one from William Davis, the chairman of the board of trustees. Natalie, they will write about you everywhere tomorrow. Get ready. If only they knew that Natalie still hadn't told her husband about the award, that she had planned to go alone, receive the award, and return home as if nothing had happened. Because explaining to Stephen where an international award came from meant admitting that his quiet housewife had been running a multi-million-dollar project for years and casually conversed with the exact people who were supposedly not her level. But now, fate had decided everything for her. Tomorrow they would be in the same hall. She, as Stephen's wife, sitting modestly in the corner, and she, as the laureate of an international award. Natalie put her phone away and went to finish her cold coffee. She had to think about a dress and what to do later, when all the cards were laid on the table. The elegant salon greeted her with the smell of hairspray and soft music. Natalie arrived early, hoping for a quiet morning, but women in expensive fur coats were already sitting nearby. You need to book in advance, the receptionist said, looking Natalie over with professional bluntness. Everyone wants to get in today before the reception at the Continental. It's such an event. They say Senator Sterling himself will be there. Natalie walked over to the stylist and settled into the chair. She saw herself in the mirror. An old coat, a purse she had glued back together a year ago, tired eyes. Next to her, two ladies were talking loudly. My Gary says all the important people in the city will be gathering there, said a blonde in a mink coat, not looking up from her manicure. Bankers, congressmen, corporate owners. Imagine the connections you can make. Have you heard about that new manager's wife? What's his name, Stephen? Chimed in a brunette with a perm. They say he finally decided to show her off for the first time ever. Natalie froze. The stylist started brushing her hair, and she tried to breathe evenly. Seriously? And who is she anyway? The blonde asked, surprised. Just a regular housewife, supposedly listed in some charity, like she volunteers or something. Gary says Stephen was always embarrassed to take her out in public. The stylist's scissors clicked. I understand him, the blonde sighed. Men of status need matching wives who take care of themselves and are well-rounded. And if a woman lives in her own little world? My Gary always says, a wife is the face of a man. The young stylist stole a glance at Natalie in the mirror. A flash of sympathy crossed her eyes. You have beautiful hair, she said quietly. A natural color. Very thick. We'll do a blowout. It will look very elegant. Behind her back, the whispering continued. Irene Vance will be there, the wife of the steel holding owner. She has jewelry worth millions. Can you imagine how that housewife will feel next to women like that? Natalie closed her eyes. Irene Vance. 3 years ago, she had personally come to the foundation's office to hand over a check for the treatment of children with oncology. She cried as she talked about her niece. Natalie, you are a real angel, she had said then, hugging Natalie tightly. A new customer walked into the salon, slim and wearing an expensive light coat. Natalie recognized her immediately. Victoria Sinclair, a banker's wife. A year ago, she organized a charity auction for the Children's Horizon Foundation. Hi, girls. Is everyone getting ready for tonight? She greeted them. Passing by to get to her stylist, Victoria Sinclair momentarily locked eyes with Natalie in the mirror and frowned, trying to remember something. Excuse me, have we met? I don't think so, Natalie answered quietly. But Victoria continued to sneak glances in her direction. Your hair is done, the stylist announced, stepping back. Natalie looked at herself in the mirror. The hairstyle really transformed her. Her hair softly framed her face. Her eyes seemed larger. "Very beautiful," the girl said sincerely. "You'll be the most elegant one today. You have kind eyes and a beautiful smile. I'm sure your evening will be wonderful." At the door, Victoria Sinclair called out to her, "Excuse me, are you sure you don't work in charity? I have a good memory for faces. What foundation do you work for?" Natalie hesitated for a moment. Children's Horizon. Victoria's face changed instantly. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God, you're—" But Natalie had already stepped outside. Through the glass door, she saw Victoria talking excitedly to the other women, who were turning to look at her in surprise. A light drizzle was falling. Natalie pulled up her collar and walked faster. She needed to buy a dress, shoes, and maybe a purse. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from Katie. "Tomorrow the whole world will know about our angel. Ready for fame?" Natalie put her phone away without replying. Fame. How strange that word sounded in a life filled with cleaning, laundry, and daily reproaches. But tomorrow, everything would change. The Continental Hotel greeted them with the sparkle of crystal chandeliers and marble columns. Natalie stopped in the spacious lobby. Her new shoes were already pinching a bit, and her simple black dress that cost a little over $30 looked modest against the surrounding splendor. "Don't just stand in the middle of the aisle," Stephen hissed, taking her by the arm. "You're acting like it's your first time in the city." Elegant couples floated by, ladies in outfits by famous designers, men in flawless tuxedos. Natalie recognized many faces from TV, from newspapers, and some from personal meetings her husband knew nothing about. "Stephen," a voice called from behind. A middle-aged man with a companion approached them. "We finally get to meet your wife. I'm Victor Pierce, marketing. And this is my wife, Olivia." Olivia, the very same blonde from the salon, looked Natalie up and down, noting every detail: the dress, the shoes, the purse. "It's a pleasure," she said with a strained smile. "I thought you'd be taller. Stephen has said so many good things about you." Natalie glanced at her husband. In 17 years, she couldn't recall him saying a single good thing about her to his colleagues. "Let's head into the hall." Stephen hurried them. "Registration is already open." The large banquet hall was strikingly grand. Round tables with fresh flowers, silver silverware, fine crystal glasses. A string quartet played on stage. "There's Congressman Bradley," Stephen whispered, nodding at a table in the front row. "Next to him is Peter Crestwood, owner of the hotel chain. See him?" Natalie saw him. A year ago, Peter Crestwood had donated an entire floor in one of his hotels for parents and children undergoing treatment at the foundation, completely free of charge. "And there's Irene Vance in the gold dress," Stephen continued. "Her husband controls half the steel industry in the region." Irene Vance turned in their direction just then and frowned slightly, recognizing Natalie. "See how proper wives dress?" Stephen said quietly. "That one in blue is the banker Sinclair's wife. Her dress probably costs as much as your annual salary." Victoria Sinclair indeed looked magnificent. She was animatedly discussing something with the people around her, occasionally glancing at Natalie. They sat down at a table in the middle of the room. Next to them were Stephen's colleagues with their wives. "Oh, here is the mysterious Natalie," exclaimed a man in glasses. "Nicholas Thorne, Finance Department. And this is my wife, Linda." "Stephen, I'm sorry. You bring her out so rarely, we started to think you made her up." Everyone laughed. Natalie felt her cheeks redden. "Natalie is a homebody," Stephen explained. "Doesn't like noisy crowds." "And where do you work?" asked the lady sitting opposite. "At a charitable foundation." "Volunteering," Nicholas smiled condescendingly. "Commendable. Although you can't really call it a real job, of course." "More like a hobby," Stephen added, "to pass the time." Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Natalie didn't check it. "And what kind of foundation?" Linda asked. For kids? Do you collect toys? Clothes? Natalie. Let's not burden people, Stephen intervened. Not the time or place. A waiter brought champagne. Natalie took a glass. Keep quiet, Stephen whispered. This isn't your level. The conversation at the table shifted to the economy. The men talked about exchange rates, taxes, and sanctions. Take charity, for instance, Nicholas was saying. It's trendy right now. Rich people are buying off their consciences, and most of the money just lines the organizers' pockets anyway. Natalie sharply raised her head. Excuse me, but that's not true, she said. Silence fell over the table. Stephen shot her a warning glare. Meaning? Nicholas asked, surprised. Reputable foundations publish reports on every dollar. There are boards of trustees and independent auditors. Natalie, Stephen said quietly but sternly. Nicholas knows better. No, I'm curious, Nicholas countered. Where does this expertise come from? I just read, she answered quietly. She reads, Stephen scoffed. I have a well-read wife, but theory and practice are different things. Natalie gripped her glass so tightly her knuckles turned white. At the next table sat William Davis, the chairman of her foundation's board of trustees, the man who, a year and a half ago, had told her, Natalie, thanks to you, more than 100 children's lives have been saved. You're doing the impossible. By the way, Nicholas continued, I recently read about this one foundation. What's it called? Children's Horizon, I think. They raised millions for treatment, and then it turned out half the money went God knows where. Natalie stood up abruptly, knocking over her glass. Excuse me, she whispered, and stepped away from the table. In the powder room, she leaned against the sink and breathed. The mirror showed a pale face and trembling hands. Linda walked in. Are you all right? Yes, thank you. Natalie splashed cold water on her face. Don't pay attention to Nicholas. He loves to hold forth on things he knows nothing about. Linda paused. And the Children's Horizon Foundation is a wonderful organization. My sister is a pediatrician. She says they've saved so many kids. Their director is an amazing woman. Visits the children herself. Knows every single story. Natalie, somehow, the door swung open abruptly. Stephen! Stephen! Natalie, what are you doing here? Let's go. The formal part is starting. Linda looked at him in surprise, then at Natalie. See you at the table, she said quietly, and walked out. Stephen closed the door. What was that? Why did you butt in? I asked you to stay quiet. He was telling lies about my foundation. Your foundation? Stephen snorted. You shuffle papers there. It's not your foundation. Natalie looked at him with a long, unblinking gaze. You're right, she said quietly. Let's go. They returned to the hall just as the host took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, in a few minutes, the ceremony for the International Professor Hartman Award for Outstanding Contributions to Children's Charity will begin in the adjacent hall. We invite everyone interested to join us. The ground swayed beneath her feet. What kind of award is that? Stephen muttered. Natalie already knew. In a few minutes, her life would change forever. Most of the guests filed into the adjacent hall. Natalie walked beside Stephen, feeling like every step was a struggle. Probably another PR stunt for the rich, he reasoned. They'll throw a couple of million at some charity and talk about it for a year. Natalie stayed silent. In her pocket was a speech she had rewritten 10 times over the last month. The ceremonial hall was decorated in understated gold tones. On the stage was a podium with a microphone and huge bouquets of white flowers. The award logo glowed on the screen, a silhouette of a child reaching toward the sun. Stephen picked seats in the middle of the room. Natalie discreetly scanned the front rows. Foundation trustees, major donors, officials from the health department. William Davis, in the second row, turned around a few times, looking for someone. Nearby, Katie was nervously twisting her purse. Weird, Stephen muttered. So many familiar faces. Peter Crestwood, Irene Vance. Didn't think they cared about charity. Maybe they do. I doubt it. Probably just to check a box. The host walked onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ceremony for the International Professor Hans Hartmann Award. This prize is awarded once every 3 years for outstanding contributions to the advancement of children's charities. Stephen yawned and checked his watch. Natalie felt her palms grow sweaty. Among our past laureates, the host continued, are the director of the Swedish Children's Fund, who saved the lives of over 2,000 children, the founder of a network of children's hospitals in Africa, and the creator of a treatment program for rare diseases in Germany. Photographs appeared on the screen. Natalie knew them all, corresponded with some, had met them at international conferences. This year, the host picked up a gold envelope. The jury reviewed 43 candidates from 20 countries and unanimously decided to honor a person whose work has saved the lives of over 500 children in the last 5 years. Stephen straightened up. 500 kids. Not bad. Natalie couldn't breathe. That exact number was listed in the Foundation's latest report. The laureate created a unique system for organizing treatment for children with rare diseases. Thanks to their work, a network of 12 specialized centers has been established. Whispers rippled through the hall. William Davis said something to his neighbor, pointing toward the exit. Katie was fidgeting with her purse. The foundation led by our laureate has raised over $10 million in private donations over 5 years. Every single cent was spent with absolute transparency. Wow, look at that scale, Stephen whistled. And here I thought these charities just collected pennies. Photographs of children appeared on the screen, smiling faces, thank you letters. Natalie recognized every single one. There was Mia, who had heart surgery. There was Danny, who received gene therapy. There was Annie, who now walked with a prosthetic. Our laureate didn't work for fame, the host continued, his voice growing more solemn. Many of the people they helped didn't even know their name. But the results speak for themselves. Natalie closed her eyes. It was true. Allow me to share a few stories. A little girl in a hospital room appeared on the screen. Sophie Lawson, 5 years old. A rare form of leukemia. Her only chance was treatment at an overseas clinic. The cost was nearly $300,000. An ordinary family from a small town. No money. Natalie remembered. She remembered the mother's voice on the phone. She remembered driving to the sponsors herself. Thanks to our laureate's work, all the necessary funds were raised in 2 weeks. Sophie received her treatment. Today, she is healthy. On the screen, the same girl appeared, but this time holding a doll, glowing with happiness. The hall applauded. Several women wiped away tears. Elijah Warren, 7 years old. A boy in a wheelchair with spinal muscular atrophy. The medication capable of stopping the disease costs millions. Natalie remembered their meeting at the hospital. A frail boy who couldn't move but told her he dreamed of becoming a programmer. The laureate didn't just raise money. They convinced the manufacturer to provide the drug for free under a humanitarian program. Elijah received his treatment. He now attends a regular school. More applause. The screen showed the boy at a computer, focused and happy. I think I've seen him somewhere, Stephen whispered. On TV or something? Natalie didn't answer. And there are hundreds of stories like these. Every saved life is a dream come true, a childhood restored. The host raised the gold envelope. Silence settled over the hall. Stephen leaned forward. The Professor Hans Hartmann Award is presented to the founder and director of the Children's Horizon Foundation, Natalie Bennett. The hall erupted. People stood up, turned around, looking for the laureate. Stephen sat with his mouth open, as if struck by lightning. Bennett, he whispered. That's you. He slowly turned to her. Natalie sat motionless, pale, her eyes wide open. Nat, he croaked. Is that really you? Natalie, the host spoke into the microphone. We're waiting for you. A spotlight found her, and the entire hall turned in their direction. It's you? Stephen grabbed her arm. She looked at him and slowly nodded. Go, he whispered, letting go of her hand. Go on stage. Natalie stood up. Her legs were trembling, but she took a step. Then another. People parted, continuing to applaud. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" Someone reached out to her. As she walked to the stage, she felt hundreds of eyes on her. But most of all, the gaze of her husband, who was left alone in an emptied row with an expression of complete shock on his face. For 17 years, he had considered her a nobody, and she turned out to be someone written about in the papers, known by millionaires, and given standing ovations by hundreds of people. With every step up to the stage, Natalie felt years of humiliation, neglect, and underestimation falling away from her. Natalie, the host said, handing her a crystal statuette, please accept our congratulations. The statuette was heavier than she expected. The clear crystal shimmered under the spotlights. An identical one sat at her home. She had told Stephen it was a souvenir from a conference. Thank you, she whispered into the microphone. The applause swelled. Natalie looked up. The entire hall was on its feet. William Davis was wiping away tears. Katie was sobbing. And there, in the middle of the room, was Stephen, alone among the empty chairs, pale, with a look of utter shock on his face. Natalie, please say a few words. Natalie stepped up to the microphone. The speech in her pocket was no longer needed. She would say something else. 5 years ago, she began, her voice trembling slightly, I was an ordinary housewife. My husband thought I was a failure, told me I was incapable of anything. The hall went dead silent. Stephen shrank in his chair. I didn't work, had no income of my own, and didn't feel needed. Truthfully, I felt like a nobody. She paused. But one day, I saw a story online about a little girl who needed surgery. Her parents had no money, and I couldn't just scroll past. A photograph appeared on the screen. A blonde toddler with huge dark eyes. The first child the foundation had helped. I created a group on social media and started raising funds. I thought maybe I'd raise a few $100. In 1 week, strangers transferred $200,000. Simply because they believed. Applause. That's how the Children's Horizon Foundation was born. At first, it was just me and an old laptop in the kitchen. I worked nights while my husband slept. I studied medical records, researched clinics, negotiated with doctors. People in the audience were crying. My husband didn't understand why I needed to do this. Natalie's voice grew firmer. He said I was wasting my time on nonsense, that I'd be better off cleaning the house. Stephen covered his face with his hands. But the children needed help, and I couldn't stop. Natalie looked at the camera. In 5 years, we've saved 512 children's lives, established 12 specialized centers, and raised over $10 million in donations. The hall erupted. Natalie, Irene Vance shouted from the front row, standing up. Thank you for my grandson's life. Others began to stand up after her. You saved my daughter. My son is alive because of you. Natalie stood there, stunned. She knew she had helped many, but she had no idea that so many of them were here right now. I'm sorry, she said when the noise died down a bit. I'm not used to this much attention. A warm, understanding laugh rippled through the room. I've always believed that the results are what matters, not the fame. It's not about us. It's about the kids. The screen once again showed the photographs. Sophie with her doll, Elijah at his computer, dozens of other children. This award belongs to everyone who helped the foundation, the doctors who worked for free, the people who donated their last dollars, the volunteers who gave their time. She looked at Stephen. And all these years, right next to me was a person who didn't believe in what I was doing, who thought my work was useless. Stephen, shrank into his seat. But you know what? Natalie smiled. It didn't break me. It made me stronger. Because I wasn't working for the validation of my loved ones. I was working for the children. The hall rose again, shouts of bravo mingling with the applause. At that moment, Natalie saw Stephen get up and head for the exit, but his path was blocked by Peter Crestwood. "Excuse me, are you Natalie's husband?" Stephen nodded. "Let me shake your hand." Peter smiled genuinely. "You are married to an amazing woman, a true angel." "Yes, of course," Stephen mumbled. "I've been supporting the foundation for 3 years. How did you manage to find such a wife?" Stephen opened his mouth and couldn't find an answer. Irene Vance walked up. "You must be so proud. Your wife is a national treasure." "Tell me," another man added, "is she just as modest at home, or does she actually talk about her successes?" Stephen turned pale. For the first time in his life, his value was determined not by his own achievements, but by the fact that he was her husband. "Excuse me," he forced out. I'll be right back." He pushed his way through the crowd and walked out. People followed him with surprised looks. When Natalie finally managed to break away from the journalists, she found Stephen out on the balcony. The October evening was chilly. "So it's all true," he said, not looking at her. All that was you?" "Yes, 5 years. 5 years you lied to me." "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you." "It's the same thing." He turned around abruptly. "You hid that you run a massive foundation, that you travel abroad, that you meet with politicians." "And if I had told you, what would you have said?" Natalie asked calmly. Stephen opened his mouth. "You would have said I was lying, that a housewife couldn't run international projects, that it was all fantasies." I would have supported you." "Like you supported me all these years when you called my work nonsense? When you said I'd be better off cleaning the house?" He turned away to the railing. The city lights twinkled below. "Tonight, in that hall," Natalie said quietly, "you saw me through other people's eyes for the first time in 17 years. "Natalie, let me finish." She turned to him. "For 17 years, you convinced me I was a nobody, that I had nothing to say, that I wasn't fit for your world. You were ashamed of me. You didn't take me to corporate parties. You didn't introduce me to your colleagues. And today, those very colleagues are congratulating you on being married to me. They're telling you how lucky you are." "I was always proud of you," he said quietly. "That's not true. You're only proud now, when you found out that others value me. That's not pride. That's vanity." Katie peeked out onto the balcony. "Natalie, sorry to interrupt. There are journalists from the national networks out there. They want an urgent interview." "I'm coming." Katie left. They were alone again. "I realized something important today," Natalie said. "I no longer need your approval. 500 children are alive because of my work. $10 million passed through my hands. Politicians ask for my advice." She looked him in the eyes. "This is my reality, and all these years, you lived in an illusion." "What are you trying to say? That you're tired?" Natalie slipped the wedding ring off her finger. "I'm tired of apologizing for who I am. Tired of pretending I'm smaller than I actually am. Natalie, let's not make any hasty decisions. Let's talk about it at home." Calmly. "At home?" She smiled bitterly. "In the house where for 17 years, you explained to me that I was a failure." She placed the ring on the railing. "Today the world found out who I am, and I have no intention of hiding again. You have time to think about whether you're ready to live with a woman who will no longer stay silent." And she walked into the hall, where the cameras, the journalists, and a new life were waiting for her. Stephen was left alone on the balcony, looking at the gold ring glittering under the lanterns. For the first time in 17 years, he realized he was risking losing, not a housewife whom he was helping to survive, but an extraordinary woman who no longer needed his patronage. And that scared him more than anything. 3 months passed. Natalie was sitting in the foundation's new office. Spacious, bright, right downtown. The building was provided by one of their sponsors. Outside the window, The first snow was falling. Documents for new projects lay on her desk. After the ceremony, everything had changed. The flow of donations had increased tenfold. Major corporations were reaching out to propose partnerships. The Department of Health and Human Services had invited Natalie to join their advisory board. But most importantly, she was no longer hiding who she was. "Natalie," Katie peeked in. "You have a visitor." Standing in the doorway was Stephen, tired, looking older. In his hands was a bouquet of white roses. "May I come in?" "Yes." He looked around. Beautiful office. Big. He put the bouquet on the desk. "I filed for divorce this morning." Natalie wasn't surprised. In 3 months, they had barely spoken. "Okay," she replied. "Natalie, I want to apologize." He leaned forward. "I was a fool. For 17 years, I didn't see who you really were." "You saw what you wanted to see." "Yes, and that's my fault." He paused. "Maybe we can try again, now that I know." Natalie shook her head. "Stephen, you only loved me when you found out that others loved me. That isn't love. That's vanity." He lowered his eyes. "And besides, for these past 3 months, you've been telling journalists that you always supported your wife, telling colleagues that you knew about her talents all along. I was proud of you. You were proud of yourself for being married to a celebrity." The phone on her desk rang. Natalie glanced at the screen. "Hello, Susan. How's Tommy?" "Natalie, the doctors say the surgery was a success. We're going home in a month." "That's wonderful. Tell Tommy I'll come visit soon." She ended the call. Stephen was looking at her. "That's what I never understood," he said quietly. "Why you needed other people's children." "They aren't other people's children." Natalie looked up at him. "When you see a suffering child, they become yours." Stephen nodded and headed for the door. "Forgive me, Natalie. I forgave you back then, on the balcony." He turned around. "For what?" "For setting me free." When the door closed, Natalie stood up and walked to the window. Snowflakes were swirling outside. It would be New Year's soon. New plans, new children who needed help. She looked at her hand. Where she had worn a wedding ring for 17 years, a faint mark remained, but with each passing day, it faded, just like the memory of the woman who once thought she was incapable of anything. On her desk lay a letter from UNICEF, offering her a position to head an international children's aid program in developing countries. Natalie picked up her pen and began to write her reply. Outside the window, the snow fell, promising a new beginning.
Your support is very important to us. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. We would love to know what you think.